Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with our host, Ned Dennison. Ned?
Hello, everyone. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have yet another one of our honorees with us today, Freda Streeter, MBE. She is affectionately known as the Channel General, and that's by anybody who's ever set foot on Dover or anybody that's been yelled at in Dover. I'd be one of each of those. Her daughter, Alison Streeter, MBE, is the queen of the channel with 34 crossings.
43.
I'm sorry, 43 crossings, apologies. And her son, Neil, is a successful channel pilot. For about 20 years, Freda spent 5 months every year training hundreds and hundreds of English Channel swimmers and aspirants on the beach in Dover Harbor. And, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of those successful swimmers owe their success to Freda's training, support, and advice. And in the last, I think it was 2 years ago, those swimmers got together and petitioned the British government to honor Freda with an MBE, which is an incredible honor. So Freda Streeter, say hello and welcome.
Hello. Yeah, hello, everyone. Right. Good to talk to you. You have to speak a little bit slow because I have not been well, and you know, things get a bit fuzzy at the moment for me.
Tell us how you got involved in the sport, Freda.
I got involved in the sport because Alison wanted to swim the channel, and there was very, very little known about it. But we met up with a person called Corey Dixon, who actually worked with Alison, and then the next year, Alison was successful, and the next year, Alison, Corey and I worked with her, and she did a two-way crossing, which made her the first European woman to successfully do a two-way crossing. Then what happened was, Corey and her husband emigrated to Australia and left with no one on the beach. So Alison still wanted to swim the channel, so I worked with her, and then other people came along and asked if I would work with them, and that's how it all happened. It just suddenly grew around me and got very big. The real reason that I did it was that I just absolutely loved seeing people achieve their dreams.
In all of the years you were training and crewing for Alison, what were the best of times, your best experiences?
Well, I think you could say that some of them were very traumatic. But when Alison actually became the first person to do a three-way, that was absolutely amazing, because we didn't know whether she could do it. We didn't know anything else. We had lots of words and everything else. We also had Lance on board, who was a teenager, and had eaten everything we got. So we were all... we were all very sort of fooled, but when she actually achieved it, it was fantastic.
And is this the same Lance Oram that's the famous channel pilot? Are you suggesting he ate all of the food on the boat as a teenager?
Well, he was only a 16-year-old teenager. You know what teenagers are like. Yeah.
Lance, that's going to cost you a few pints next time we see you.
Yeah.
And the scariest times you had crewing for Alison. I'd heard a story about the first time she attempted the North Channel.
That was really, really scary, because nobody else knew what was going on. We were so close to Scotland that everyone was getting so excited that they hadn't realised that Alison had gone unconscious on us. And, just managed to hang on to her and get them to help me pull her aboard. And she was unconscious for quite a while. it was just so scary as to whether we would get back to Ireland in time to save her. But they pulled out all the stops there. They had a doctor actually waiting on the quayside who gave her a massive sort of not antibiotic, a massive I can't think of what it is now. And he stayed with her all day. He was fantastic.
And after that experience in the North Channel, how long before she attempted it again?
Oh, I think it was only about 3 weeks, if I remember rightly. But that was done.
As her mother, did you try to convince her not to?
Sorry?
As her mother, did you try to convince her not to do it the second time?
Yeah. Yes,
and you were unsuccessful.
She's the second time, she was with a different pilot, and he actually swum her straight into Port Patrick Harbour, which is absolutely amazing. It's such a tiny place. He just swung her through. And the interesting thing then was that we forget in these remote communities what the bush telegraph is like. And when she swam into the harbour and actually climbed up, she said, "What are all these people doing here?" And, they said, "They've come to see you." The lifeboat said, that you were going to land, and here we are. And they had a car on the quayside, which took us straight to the local pub, which had sort of everything there ready for her, a bath and everything else, and we were all fed and everything else before we returned to Ireland. But the interesting thing is we travelled back to Ireland overnight, and the mayor from Bangor was waiting on the quayside for us, and he said, "Well, where have you been?" And we said, "Well, we had a meal." He said, "I'm not talking about that." He said, "I heard you lot hours ago coming back." And, of course, the sound out there travels over water brilliantly because there's nothing else much about. So he was standing there hearing us, but, of course, we were nowhere near.
Fantastic. How did your son Neil get involved, and how did he end up as one of the great pilots?
Neil, right from the age of about 2 or 3, was always in tune with the sea. Always. We did all sorts of things with him. And I remember one day, he was only about 4, and he'd taken me out in this little dinghy, and suddenly he sat up straight and he said, "We've got to get in. We've got to get in. We've got to get in quick." And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And he said, "We just got to get in." And because we were in a bay, we got in and pulled the dinghy out of the water, and we were the only people to get out of the water that day without being rescued. And he had realised early that an offshore breeze had blown up and was blowing everyone out to sea. And, things took off from there, and he went on to get very friendly with Alison's pilot in the channel, who was Fred Carrimode. And Fred took him, just taught him how to navigate the Solent. And the thing that can't happen today is that at 13 and 14 years old, Neil and David Carrimode were both of them actually taking on Solent swims. And that's how he trained. He was trained with by Fred, and as I say, at a very early age, 13 years old, was actually piloting with David their own channel swim, Solent swims. So everything is inbuilt in Neil, and I never know why or what it was.
Freda, do you remember the year you started on the beach in Dover?
Yes, quite clearly. quite clearly. I'd had Sean Roper, who had been attempting to swim the channel several times, and he came to me and asked if I'd train him. Had a wonderful guy called Cliff Golding. It was a model to train, but a nightmare to get across. And
it took him a few attempts, didn't it, Freda?
Sorry?
It took him a few goes to get there, didn't it?
Yes. Until I told him one day, and he said, well, cheerio, I'm off, because he was going off to swim the channel during the week. And he said, I'll see you at the weekend. I said, well, that depends, Cliff Golding. So he goes, oh, it depends on what? I said, if you make it, come back here, and we're all going to be absolutely over the moon. But if you get out again, don't come back here. I said, because all you're doing is sending negative vibes all round the camp. And he looked so disappointed. But of course, I did let him back. And eventually he made it.
So that's a little bit of the Freda tough love and real.
Oh, there was lots of tough love that went into my training. Lots of it. There's so many stories that I could really tell that we'd be here forever.
We'll pick a few more stories out in a minute. Tell us about the change in the sport over the decades. Presumably when you first started at Dover Beach, there were a few swimmers, and by the time you ended, there were hundreds.
I just think it's very, very, very sad the way that it's gone, that so many people are jumping on a bandwagon and charging a fortune for these poor swimmers, and they don't really need it. All they need is a bit of tough love, a bit of things pointed out to them, and the right training. And I think that channel swimming has taken a much, much bigger turn for the worse. And as I say, all these people making loads of money. And when I think back and all the time that I gave, I could be sitting on my own private Caribbean island by now if I'd actually charged them. So yes, I feel very, very sad about it. I really do.
There's many reasons that the channel community loves you, Freda, but one of the reasons is you were a volunteer for decades. Yeah.
When I retired, I did actually have to charge them because I had to charge them for petrol money and their food. But that was only about £10 from May to September, and that was their total cost with me. And
so to put that into terms that Americans will understand, that's $13 for the summer.
Yeah.
And that's the carbohydrate drinks and presumably a jelly roll every now and then, some jelly beans or something.
Yeah, you're forgetting to speak a bit slower now. This old lady's been locked down in her house since March, so I'm not really that clever about picking things up quickly.
In your last years on the beach, how did you organize the swimmers?
Again, with sort of tough love and discipline, really, about where they could swim, how they could swim, and working with the local community, either yacht club and all the other boats. And we worked out, and we had a good system that we allowed in the harbour space for the yachties to get in and out, so our swimmers were forbidden to go, past certain poles and things like that. And the yachties had to sail beyond where our swimmers were swimming. And the rowers were the biggest problem because they do their sport backwards. So they're not necessarily...
I heard...
They do their sport backwards, so they're not looking. Yeah. And that was their biggest problem. But once we worked out a boundary for them and our swimmers, everything was fine.
I heard some outrageous stories, Freda. I was told once by a young, innocent swimmer that they came down to Dover. You looked them in the eye and you said, 6 hours today, 8 hours tomorrow, and sent them off in the water.
Yeah, that's right. They looked at me horrified, but the interesting thing was they did it.
Tell us about some of your favorite swimmers over the years. Some of your best stories.
Oh. Excuse me, just let me get a drink. That's better. That's a bit better. It would be unfair to have me to name some of my best swimmers because they were all my best swimmers. They were all my favourites. And I just loved all the different challenges that they really gave me to train them, to get them beyond the point of being just a swimmer to being just a channel swimmer. I had one girl, she was 14. She came to swim with a team, and she just stood out from the team. She wasn't the fastest swimmer, and the parents of the other, got very angry with me for choosing her. But there was a reason that she could stay at her own pace, and nothing fazed her. No jellyfish or anything like that fazed her, whereas all the others used to go mad. And she came back to me, her father brought her back to me the following year and said, she wants to swim on a solo. And I said, she's very young and I don't think we should put her through that yet. And he was insistent that she could cope with the failure and everything else, but she was brilliant, and Lee Williams was her name at the time, and she just did everything, and was successful at 15. And that was, of course, before the age limit came in. But I'm still not happy with the age limit being 16. I still think it should be 18. If they're 18 before they can run a marathon, why the hell are we letting them swim across the channel at 16 when it's far, far worse than a marathon? I don't understand, but never mind. On the other hand, Neil had a fabulous 16-year-old that swam the channel this year, and he was thrilled to bits with him. I think he did about 10 hours. So there we go.
I have some memories, Freda, of...
Speak a bit louder, Nick. Ned.
Yeah, I remember a few times where your contribution was very much appreciated. I happened to be on the beach once. Can you hear me, Freda?
No, not very well. Speak slower, speak louder. Sorry.
I remember being on the beach when a swimmer returned after a successful solo and giving you a giant hug and the entire beach erupting in applause.
Yeah.
I also saw you at many of the channel dinners where you were dressed in all of your finery, and swimmers were queuing up to give you a hug and tell you how brilliant the rest of their summers had been.
That's right.
Perhaps my favorite memory was being on the ferry in 2009 when you had a surprise birthday party with hundreds of swimmers. Tell us about walking onto that ferry when you finally figured out it was for you.
I was just totally and utterly amazed. I could not believe what was happening. I just could not believe it. It was the most enjoyable day of my life. And it was my 70th birthday. And I'm now 81, and I still look back on it as just a thrilling experience. What a bunch of swimmers.
I promise never to tell, but I'm going to tell now. It was Cliff Golding that ate all the shrimp before you got on the phone.
Sorry. A bit slower.
It was Cliff Golding who ate all the shrimp.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that then.
Not to worry. Freda, what are the 5 signs that a channel aspirant is actually going to make it to France? And what are the bad signs?
Well, you'll always get the surprises. You get the surprises with someone like Cliff that does everything right, that actually can train and be a dream to train, that doesn't make it. There's people that can be an absolute nightmare, and you think, well, I'm very sorry, they're never going to make it, and they do. You know, it's in the mind. It's in the mind, and that's what you've got to get to. You know, that you are strong, you're a strong enough swimmer, and yes, you know, you will make it. You might not be fast, but you'll get there.
Is this the mental toughness to deal with problems at 4, 8, and 12 hours in the channel?
Yeah. I've got to be honest now. I've got to name one of my most favourite swimmers is Nick Adams. And Nick came to me as a 14-year-old with no real experience. You know, we moulded him, and he swam the channel. But he was very, very strong-minded. And I think he's done the channel now, 14, 15 times? And he's still a pleasure to take.
And he met his wife on the beach?
Sorry?
And he met his wife on the beach?
Oh, well, Sakura, his wife, actually swam the channel herself. And they were just two very, very determined and strong-minded people who had a background of swimming anyway when they came to us. So, you know, I mean, I could never have done on the beach what I did in the lesser years without Barry and Irene Wakeham. They were just my props. They were fantastic couple. And, you know, we found all different ways of working out numbers for them and how to number them and how to check them and check them on every feed. And, you know, I mean, I do remember one day that with the relay swimmers that we had and the solo swimmers, we actually ended up by putting 135 swimmers in the water, to which the harbour master said, "What are you doing to my harbour? You do realise it's not a swimming pool." But he was very jovial about it because he realised, you know, that we were as safe as we could be. And, you know, I remember a guy called Rick, who came over from Australia, who was blind. And he said, you know, well, I have no problems. Sort of, okay, you can see shapes, make sure you keep to the left. And the next thing we know is he's swimming straight out of the harbour because he was totally disorientated, and we had to go and get all sorts of boats to go and pick him up and bring him back. But he just laughed about it. But, you know, we devised a way for him. Unfortunately, he never got across the channel, but he was, you know, he was a very good swimmer, a very strong mind. But unfortunately, his body just kept letting him down.
Finally, Freda, talk to us about the last 6 months and your health and the COVID lockdowns.
Well, the last 6 months of my life, or 7 months actually, since the beginning of March, is I was very, very lucky that I had bowel cancer detected and had an operation at the beginning of March, which took away all the sort of offending parts, fitted me with a stoma bag. So yes, that took a lot of getting over. And what was actually worse for me was that because of the virus, instead of having the convalescence and all the time that I should have had in hospital, I sort of came home 10 days afterwards when I should have actually been in hospital for 3 weeks and convalescent for 3 weeks. And the worst part of that was, of course, that I lost my husband 6 years ago. So I live on my own and actually had to come home and cope. And I'm still trying to cope because, no, I'm not going out. I have problems with high blood pressure, which, okay, we seem to have got under control now. So hopefully, let's get Christmas over with, and I should be able to get back and get out and meet people again. It's the not being able to meet people which upsets me more than anything.
Freda Streeter, MBE, Channel General, one of the people from the sport who's given so much of her time for free on a volunteer basis. It's been a pleasure to touch base with you again, Freda. And on behalf of the entire sport, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all. And all the swimmers, I love you all. I miss you. Okay.